Welcome back, everybody, to Pure Picks. I'm your host, James, and we're joined here by my friend and colleague, Gerard. How are you doing today, Gerard?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, we're here to break down UFC Fight Night, Almeida versus Lewis in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Before we get to that, though, I wanted to recap UFC 294. It was about almost 2 weeks ago now, and there was a little bit of a week in between. So, wanted to recap what we did and how we did there. Before I do, please like, comment, and subscribe for the channel. It would really help out for the algorithm, really help us grow, and really help us move forward in terms of this MMA betting scheme. So, let's just start with the Abu Dhabi UFC 294 results. We did pretty well as a group, up 6.6, I mean 6.16 units actually. So not too bad. Uh, Pretty good, profitable event for all of us. And I wanted to go over, any kind of our hits or misses. Really, it's a really good educational thing to do, especially after every event. You want to see where you went right, where you went wrong, so you can learn for next time and then constantly just improve because that's really what this game is all about as far as UFC. So let's start with some wins that we had. First parlay that I had was Magomed, Chimaev, Makachev, and Aliskerov money line. Obviously, the Magomed and Ankalaev one was a little bit of a sketch kind of no contest. I mean, he probably should have got DQ'd if we're just being honest, but we'll take it because that, when a leg on your parlay gets no contest, it's a good thing for the viewers to know that it actually just voids on the leg. So it means that the leg is taken out of the parlay and you just kind of move forward with less juice, which is what happened. So the leg didn't really bust because it was no contest, even though it probably should have, because that knee was very illegal to say the least. So we got out of a tough situation there. The other prop that I had was Elliott versus Mokaev under 2.5. I definitely should have just did Mokaev by sub. I had a feeling that was going to happen, but I was very scared off because of Mokaev's last fight. I mean, Jefe Fialho, the Brazilian guy that he fought. I mean, he almost tore Mokaev's leg off. So I thought that it was going to end pretty soon, and we just missed the under 2.5 by 30 seconds. So tough luck there. But got to move on for the next time. Really, the lesson that I learned there was, hey, Tim Elliott. I think I might have overestimated his finishing ability against Mokaev, especially. I mean, Mokaev, good offensive grappler, but I think he showed a lot of good defense as well. He also ended up in a lot more offensive and dominant positions. So that's something that I'll take for next time is, hey, Mokaev, if we do fade him or if I do fade him, I might want to fade him with someone who maybe could punish him on the feet and also kind of sprawl brawl him instead of someone who just really wants to sub him like a Tim Elliott because I don't think Tim Elliott had enough of a jiu-jitsu wrestling game to really uh, throw Mokaev off his game. And that's something that I should have saw. Also, I mean, he's pretty old too. Now, I will say that Tim Elliott was, I think, up on two judges' scorecards going into the third. So, you know, um, very slight miss there, in my opinion, but still a miss nonetheless. So I'll take those lessons into account for the next time. Gerard, what kind of hits or misses did you have, and what can we learn from that, just so we can really tell the viewers and let them know as well?
Yeah. So on this card, I had Nurmagomedov as my lock on the card, which actually hit from had a few other potential locks that were all stopped and didn't even have a outcome because of no contest and whatnot. But yeah, this first parlay here, it's Nurmagomedov, Chimaev, and Makachev. So it's all favorites here. I actually hedged this with all the combinations for the Chimaev and Makachev fights. So I also had the same plays with Nurmagomedov and Volk and Usman on these next three parlays here. These are basically it's like a round robin with most of my wager on the favorites on the parlay. So I mostly broke even here with having all favorites. Had there been one upset, I would have had we would have made more units. I just couldn't fade Usman and Volk on the same card. It was just hard for me to do that. But I mostly broke even there with four parlays with one hitting. And then my last parlay is all Nurmagomedov and the over 2.5
Yeah,
for Usman and Hamzat, which hit. And I had one hedge play with Volk instead of Makachev on a parlay, which lost, but I made more off of the Nurmagomedov over 2.5 Usman Chimaev and Makachev to win. So that one hit, and that made much more of a much more units was profited from that. So those were the plays for me.
awesome, awesome. And I really like that 2.5, by the way. That was something that was actually plus odds, if everyone remembers. I think it was like plus 143 or something like that. So
Mm.
very good juice as a part of the parlay leg right there. Also, I think you're totally right about the Usman side, at least. That was a very close fight. Could have been a draw for all we know.
Yeah.
So, maybe if it wasn't in Abu Dhabi, it could have been a draw, or maybe even a 28, 29, 28 Usman, maybe. Because Chimaev, I
Hmm.
think Chimaev did enough. Personally, I scored it a draw. I did Chimaev 10-8 first round, then Usman last two rounds. But
Same here.
yeah, good thing for us because I mean Chimaev won, and he was in a lot of parlays, and yeah, I think that was also another one where we might have also got out with a good kind of luck there because talking about Magomed, Chimaev, and these guys, oof, those are tough. They easily could have been an L for DQ for Magomed, and Chimaev easily could have been a draw, so it could have been a void. So yeah, I mean
Hmm.
that's something that we'll take into account for the next time, right? Me personally as well, just for Chimaev. Once he fights a real 185er, that's something that I'm really gonna try to look at as far as who the matchup is because he did not look that impressive to me. He just had a
Yeah.
great one round, and the last two rounds we saw the demons come out again, where he just faded. So yeah, that's something that I'll take into account. Also, Magomed. I mean, I thought this guy was a high IQ, high level kickboxer. He just threw a knee, an illegal knee, and yeah, you can't do that. So those are something that I'll just keep in mind for the next time these guys fight. And we'll see how we could either ride them or fade them for the next event. But that's just something that I would always keep in mind for the next fight. Without further ado, let's move on to UFC Sao Paulo, Brazil. This is something that is going to be the first fight card for the month at November 4th. We have Jailton Almeida versus Derek Lewis is the main event. And obviously, since it's going to be a Sao Paulo card, going to see a lot of Brazilians on this card and, some interesting matchups, some potential money making kind of matchups as well. So let's just get started as far as the card. Um, first fight that we have in the card is going to be Kaue Fernandes versus Marc. This is going to be a very, very interesting fight because we basically have Kaue Fernandes. I mean, he's a unknown kind of fighter, right? If you go to like sometimes we don't even have his date of birth, official kind of date of birth. I mean, on UFC.com or UFC stats, they say that he's born March 17th, 1995, but that's the only thing that I saw. I don't really see any other date of birth. So this guy's a total kind of mystery man, if you will, for the general public. Um, he is 8-1, 4-1 in his last five. His last loss was to another kind of undefeated fighter, if you will. He's obviously from Brazil, fighting against Marc Diakiese, UFC veteran, 16-7. He is 2-3 in his last five, coming off of that kind of submission with a lose loss against Joel Alvarez there, Darce choke. He's 30 years old, 5'10". Um, as far as the reach and the height, I think these guys are probably going to be pretty similar. Again, we don't have a kind of reach on Kaue yet because he needs to kind of officially measure out. But I think these guys are going to be probably pretty similar as far as their measurables. Just going into this fight and breaking down the tape for Kaue is really interesting because he doesn't really have too much tape. A lot of the things that I found out about him are, kind of word of mouth and kind of just doing research. He does fight out of this camp called Nova Yanao, really famous camp that has been a long-term partner in feeding legitimate talent to the UFC. The fighters from this camp include Jose Aldo, Renan Barao, Leonardo Santos, Mateus Nicolau. Those guys are all kind of legit. Cowie's actually been training with Jose Aldo in his younger days, is something that I also found out as well. There's like some pictures or videos of him doing that. So interesting kind of training that he's had throughout his whole career. He made his pro debut in 2013 and has a great 8-1 record, although that does mean that he's averaging less than one fight a year, right? That's not the most active fighter that we have here. I think that when I do see the tape of him, especially his last two fights, I mean, he's been KOing people early in the round one with some devastating, dangerous kicks. I mean, the last fight that he had, I believe it was a head kick KO within round, like early in round one. The second to last was a kick to the body. So this guy has devastating kicks, and it ended with the kicks. He fights pretty free and loose on the toes. He can also get flashy, dance outside the pocket. I also think that he has good speed and power to attack and get inside the pocket pretty quick. A Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, pretty well-rounded fighter with solid takedown defense. Not the best, but it is solid. I think that he might have a potential gas cardio issue, especially this being a UFC debut, right? We haven't really seen this guy in the UFC cage against a UFC caliber kind of opponent like Marc Diakiese. Marc obviously is a powerful kickboxer, turned into a wrestler, grappler later on in his career, especially his last few fights. I feel like he's been pretty timid later on in his career, doesn't really want to entertain those slugfests anymore. For me, that makes him really into a bad optics kind of fighter, right? He relies on the takedowns, control time to pull out the win on the judge's scorecard, doesn't really dominate in this realm even unless it's a zero like a Slava Claus who he beat or a Demir Hazovic who he beat as well. I mean, those guys are basically on the ground at least. I think they're kind of cans, if you will. Really, ever since he lost to Rafael Fiziev, which was fight of the night, it was a great fight. I feel like he's lost the swag that he had on the feet. I mean, he even lost a decision to Michael Johnson, right? That's not really a good look. I mean, Michael Johnson's good, but way past his prime. I mean, that's not a good look to lose a decision to him. He got submitted by Rafael Alves, who's I don't even think that guy's in the UFC anymore, right? I'm pretty sure they cut him for losing a lot. So it's just not really that impressive of a resume so far in his last five fights. I personally think that the UFC is done with Marc and his boring kind of style where he just tries to grapple people to death, and they want to push Kaue and Sao Paulo. The only concern I have is Kaue, although I think he's a good underdog play, I'm concerned that he might be like first round or bust, or like, second round or bust or something like that, just because he does have some cardio gas tank issues. However, I feel like he's going to be dangerous enough to finish a guy like Marc Diakiese. I mean, Marc was just finished his last fight against Joel Alvarez, right? Even though that one came under kind of some fluky, kind of way, but still he got finished pretty early. So the play here for me and the pick is Kaue. I think it's a good underdog play. I would just go with his money line, or if I am too concerned about his gas tank, maybe just something like a round one or like an inside decision, inside the distance decision, no action. That's something that is also in play. And just to let you know about the odds for this fight, I mean, it's getting closer and closer by the day. Marc Diakiese opened up at a minus 175, and he's now a minus 123. It's almost a pick 'em now. So a lot of dog odds for this fight, for Kaue at least, has been bet down. And, he's getting closer to a pick 'em. That's why I think that the value might not be there anymore, to be honest. Um, the props really haven't released yet. The only prop that we have is an over 2.5, which is at one minus 165 right now. So people do think that this fight's going to go to decision. Um, yeah, I think Cowie is a good money line play, and I'll look for the props when they release. However, people do think this is going to decision. So if it does go decision, I mean, Marc Diakiese could win that. So I think inside the distance decision no action could be good too, because I don't think Marc's going to finish Cowie from what I see. So the pick here is Cowie. Gerard, what are your thoughts on this first fight that we have to kick off the card here?
So Kaue, he doesn't have. I wasn't able to find too much tape on him, but from what I've heard and what I was able to see, he does have, I guess, some dynamic strikes in terms of those kicks. And yeah, like you said, yeah, he might have a gas tank issue, which doesn't bode well against Marc Diakiese, who I think might be able to uh, overpower him and use his strength against him. I just don't know if Fernandez is able to find a finish here, because I do think Diakiese is actually pretty durable, and he's pretty experienced as well. And on a debut fight for Fernandez, he's going up against a experienced fighter who's pretty well rounded. I would say who started off as a striker, and he can mix it up. And yeah, I think Diakiese might be able to just, if he takes him down, he can hold him there for quite a bit, I think. And if it gets past round one, that's even worse for Fernandez. So I'm probably gonna pass on this just because I'm just not sure of what's gonna happen here. And I'm leaning Marc Diakiese just on experience and durability and being able to have more ways to do things. But Fernandez is probably more the more dangerous fighter. But if it gets past round one, then it could be bad for Fernandez. So yeah, I'm leaning Diakiese here, but I'm probably gonna pass.
Makes sense. And another thing that I just thought about, by the way, is this is similar to when Fernando Padilla fought Julian Erosa, right? Fernando Padilla was this guy that the UFC kind of kept under wraps. I mean, there's not really that much tape of Fernando, not too much tape that I saw. And Fernando, the difference between this fight and that fight, obviously, was Fernando was like a plus 200 dog. And I remember that because I got him in that dog action. So that's why I remember that. But the difference here is that, I mean, this is a pick 'em, right? So the value is kind of gone at this point. That's why I don't know if there's too much value left as far as putting Cowie as like a near pick'em at plus 200. I'll be all over that all the time. But the reason why Fernando and Cowie are kind of similar is just because Cowie just has no kind of limited tape as well, right? People really don't know about this guy. His date of birth isn't really even available outside, so I feel like I don't know. And Marc Diakiese is a kind of a well-known name within the kind of non-casual MMA scene, right? Everybody kind of knows him. He's fought in a lot of fights in the UFC. So I don't know. Maybe they might be feeding this guy so he can kind of build off the hype and name, just like Padilla did. And maybe they sell him for the next time when he faces a guy like a Kyle Nelson or something like that. So who knows? We'll see what happens though. Moving on to the next fight. This is going to be, I think, another interesting fight as well. Um, Obviously, women's MMA, I'm probably going to stay away just because I haven't had the best kind of time there. This is going to be Montserrat Ruiz versus Eduarda Moura. Ruiz is 10-3. She is 2-3 in her last five. Obviously, not the greatest track record in her last two. She's been kind of knocked out in her last two, so not the greatest time there. She's 30 years old. She's fighting against Eduarda Moura, 9-0, 5-0 in her last five. She's coming off that really impressive submission rear naked choke on the Dana White Contender Series. I mean, this fight for the measurables, it's going to be pretty stark and drastic. I mean, Mora is going to be the much bigger person here, much bigger girl. I think Ruiz, she's one of those girls that's fighting at strawweight when she should probably be fighting at like atom weight, which is like the weight class below that. But since the UFC doesn't have that weight class, she's fighting up. It's kind of similar to Karate Hottie, right? Michelle Watterson. She's probably should be fighting a weight class lower, but this is the kind of smallest weight class the UFC has, so she's going to be at a major, kind of a measurable physicality kind of disadvantage here. Um, Ruiz does have championship wrestling credentials. She with like sus stand up skills though. She seems to be very hittable when I'm watching her. Even when she's getting takedowns, she's taking a lot of damage. Um, she is taken down more times than she took down her last opponent in her last fight, so that's not a really good sign. Been KO'd in her last two fights, like I mentioned, so durability seems to be non-existent lately. Moura coming off a dominant win, instant kind of takedown the sub in round one. I personally think that this is going to be a steamroll based on the tape that I've seen. Just Moura is going to be so much bigger than Ruiz. I think that not only is Moura going to have the physical advantage though, but I feel like she's going to have the technical advantage too over Ruiz everywhere. The stand-up skills, the jiu-jitsu, the wrestling, not probably not the wrestling technique, but I think that the strength and size advantage is going to overcome any kind of technique advantage that Ruiz might have over the wrestling. Once again, this is a UFC debut, technically, just because Mora did fight the Dana White Contender Series, but she seems like a lock to me. If I were to play this, I would say Mora inside the distance might be good. But once again, I'm probably not going to play this. I'm probably going to pass on this. The over 2.5 and the odds, just to tell you, I mean, the odds have gone pretty wild. Mora is now a minus 550 favorite, but it was even crazier than that because she opened up at minus 750. So people instantly took money on the dog odds there. I don't blame them. I mean, women's MMA, anything could happen at that point. The over 2.5, usually that's something that I would like to attack for fights like this. But I mean, the over 2.5 right now is plus 130. So people think that this fight's going to probably be finished. I tend to agree. I think Mora is probably going to knock her out or sub her. So the pick here is Mora inside the distance, but I'm probably staying away from this one. Gerard, what are your thoughts on Ruiz versus Mora here?
When I look at Ruiz, she's undersized, and yeah, she needs a different weight division because I think against Mora, Eduardo Mora is gonna look like Eduardo Mora. She's gonna manhandle Ruiz here, and same here. I think she's gonna get steamrolled. I just don't see Ruiz being a UFC caliber fighter. When I look at her tape, I don't know what she does good,
Yeah,
and it's supposed to be grappling, but she's greatly undersized in this division. So this is probably a steamroll, but again, I'm taking a break from women's MMA. So it gets women's MMA can get weird, even with big favorites. But I would say Eduardo's probably parlayable, but yeah, I'm staying away from women's MMA for the time being. And yeah, this should be a steamroll for Mura. That's how I see it.
yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, that's right. I mean, word for word, that's what I agree with. I just feel like I have seen Mora. in some of her IG videos as she posts or social media as she posts. Man, she is like lifting weights like crazy. Like she's so strong, and kind of seeing her compared to Ruiz, I think this is going to be a mismatch as far as the physicals wise. So yeah, same play here. I'm probably going to stay away. But let's move on to the next fight. And before I do get to that, I want to say that Lucas Alexander, I think David Onama pulled out. So I think he's still searching for an opponent. We'll see what happens. But I suspect that the UFC might not find anybody for him, and he might have to pull out as well. So that was going to be the next fight on the card. But from one women's fight to another, since that one is kind of canceled, we have a much more, I think, debatable fight as far as the women's MMA fight. We have Angela Overkill Hill versus Denise Gomes. This is going to be, I think, a fun fight to break down just because we're going to have a lot of differing views as far as the MMA scene. I've seen a lot of differing views on this fight already. Angela Hill obviously is, the UFC veteran, right? 15 and 13. I feel like she spent her whole career in the UFC. She's always fought in the octagon for a number of years. She is 2 and 3 in her last five, coming off of that beat down by Mackenzie Dern, where she just got manhandled the whole fight. 38 years old. That's something that bears watching in this fight. That's a really kind of up there in age, especially for a women fighter. Um, you know, Denise Gomes 8-2, 4-1 her last five. She's coming off of that big KO victory over Yasmin Haregi. Yasmin was I think a pretty decent sized favorite in that fight, and Denise stopped that in its tracks and KO'd her in the first round. Um, 23 years old. There's going to be a 15-year age gap here. Denise is going to be a much younger fighter. As far as their measurables, I mean, they're pretty much similar as far as how they kind of are their height and their reach, pretty similar. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that the 15 and 13 record for Angela Hill kind of deceiving, right? She's fought the best of the best, gone to toe with them in the last 10 years. If you look at her career, I mean, all decisions in a way, right? She's lost split decisions, unanimous decisions. I mean, it's been somewhat close fights throughout her career. She's mostly a striker, uses her speed and volume to edge out decisions. That's really her game plan. I think she's actually decent everywhere. Decent takedown defense, kind of a stick and move style, crazy durable. She's never been knocked out. Not dangerous though, especially at age 38. I mean, this is going to be, if she does win, it's going to be a decision. I think Gomes has great power at 115, especially coming off of the massive KO upset over Yasmin. She has decent takedowns, but she is more of a striker than a grappler herself. Now, according to MMA Math, they do share a common opponent. Loma look I don't know how to say her last name. Loma Lookboomy. I've watched her fight though. Hill got the dub over Loma. Gomes got the L, and she was actually 30-27 on two of the judges' scorecards, so she lost like all three rounds. Now you could say that Gomes has improved since then, right? She's after that loss to Loma, she's had two wins over Bruna Brazil, and then obviously Yasmin. She's only 23, so she could be getting better and better. While Angela Hill obviously could be getting worse and worse. Um, I think that the interesting thing about Angela Hill is she does tend to do well against fighters like a Emily Ducati or like even a Lupi Godinez, fighters that don't have the best power and then can kind of, fight her back in a kind of a decision fight. She does well in those fights. However, when she does lose, it's usually to people who have a kind of power advantage over her. You saw that with Amanda Lemos. I mean, she did get knocked down against Amanda. I think that it was a close fight. Obviously, it was a split decision, but I have a feeling that Denise is gonna have a bit of a too much of a power advantage over Hill. Um, but a part of me really also thinks that Denise, I mean, she's coming off of this huge KO win, right? To me, that's like a sell the top kind of signal. I don't know if Denise is she that good? I mean, this is gonna be for Angela Hill at least, especially coming off fighting Mackenzie Dern, who's like a top 10 in her division. You could even say top five. To fight a person like Denise Gomes, I mean, young in her UFC career, 23 years old. I think this is going to be such a step down in competition for Angela Hill. Um, I think it's a close fight. I mean, the odds, it's almost near a pick 'em right now, right? I mean, Denise Gomes opened up at a minus 210. She's now a minus 121. So people are taking the dog action on Angela Hill. I don't blame them. I mean, if I were to pick this, I'll say leaning Hill by decision. When the props come out, I want to definitely see what that looks like because I think that could be interesting. But once again, I'm probably not going to play either side here. The thing that I will probably attack that I think could be a potential good parlay piece is over 2.5. I think minus 300 over 2.5. I'm pretty much banking that Angela Hill's going to survive whatever Denise Gomes has for her. I mean, I know it's dangerous because Denise has pretty much KO'd her last two opponents, in pretty convincing fashion. So it is a tough one to kind of look at. But I mean, she did also get 30-27 by Loma, like not too long ago. So pick here is Angela Hill by decision. I think the over 2.5 could be a great parlay piece, and that's probably what I'll play when it comes to it. Gerard, what are your thoughts on this Hill versus Gomes fight here?
Angela Hill, yeah, she's been in there with a lot of so, great fighters, solid experience. This is probably a step up for Denise Gomes. Um, the way I see this fight, looking at the whole card, I think this might be the most live bettable fight on the card, if you know what you're
Mm,
looking for. And Angela Hill, she has a good shot at winning if you we see her with the volume and constant pressure coming forward. So in the
mm,
first round, what I would look for is if Denise Gomes has to start fast. If she doesn't start fast, she's liable to lose a decision against Angela Hill because, like, if you're too patient against Angela Hill's shot at winning increases a lot. So I would look to. I'm probably not going to play either side before the fight starts, but if I see in like the first 30 seconds to minute and a half in the first round, if I see Angela Hill's the one who's backing up Denise Gomes, I might play a little bit on Angela Hill on a live bet. But if I see Denise Gomes start fast, then I'll probably play Denise Gomes live bet a little bit there because it always seems like Angela Hill wins these decisions if she's the one who has the volume and has the pressure, and the opponent is too patient, too much of a picking their shots type of fight against Angela Hill. They tend to lose. That's how we saw Emily Ducati lose that fight, and that Loma fight, that Luke Bunmi. We saw Luke Bunmi on the back foot, and she ended up losing that to Angela Hill, and she wasn't doing that against Denise Gomes. So that's how Loma beat Denise Gomes in that fight. So yeah, this fight, I think this is the most live bettable fight on the card. The only thing to worry about here is Brazil decision. If Denise Gomes looks like she's winning, but it's in Brazil, they might want to push her push her forward in her career. But yeah, I'm leaning. I'm live betting this probably. Yeah. So if I had to pick, I would lean Denise Gomes just because it's in Brazil. But I think this is the most live bettable fight on the card.
I love that strategy actually. Something that I think could be pretty profitable just because, like you mentioned, the forward pressure. That's something that um, very good as far as looking at live bets. Yeah, that's something that I agree with. Great strategy there. Let's move on to the next fight on the card. We have Vitor Petrino versus Modestas Bukauskas. Another kind of heavy-handed kind of fight here. I think it's going to be two in the 205 division. Vitor Petrino, obviously 9-0, 5-0 in his last five. He's coming off of that submission actually over Marcin Pracino. Before that, had a pretty good win over Anton, although he did look like he struggled a little bit there, but he still got the dub. Something that really impressed me actually too about that dub, just because he kind of pulled through his cardio kind of issue, and then his last fight against Porcino came back and looked great. Um, he's going to be the younger fighter here. I mean, Modestas is obviously 15-5, 4-1 in his last five. He's coming in off of that kind of boring decision over Zach Pauga. Not the greatest fight. He did beat Tyson Pedro before that, so that was a pretty good victory. As far as their measurables, I mean, they're pretty much similar. I think Modestas has a 1 inch advantage in height and reach, so nothing too crazy there. Um, this is going to be, I think, a launching pad for Vitor if he actually wins this. I mean, he has great raw potential. I think he's obviously not the most technical guy, but he's a dangerous striker as far as just his power. If he lands that hook on you, or he lands any of these kind of looping shots on you, you're probably going to go out if he lands cleanly. He also has grappling potential as well. I mean, you see his takedowns against Anton, especially. He was also taken down during that fight, but he had a lot of will and kind of drive to win that fight. Absolute unit, powerhouse. I think in his last fight against Marcin, I think that he overcame a lot of those gassing issues. I mean, he lasted all 3 rounds, found the sub at the end, so he also looks for the finish, was something that's pretty impressive for me. Although he did display an impressive drive and will to win that decision over Anton, he did get taken down 5 times by Anton. So it's going to be interesting to see if, Modestas implements any kind of grappling game. I doubt it, though. I mean, I don't think that Modestas has like any takedowns, at least in the UFC. So they're both probably going to try to stay on the feet, but I think Vitor just will have a more of a grappling edge there. So Vitor for me is going to be the one who's going to dictate where this fight's going to go, right? Either he was going to want to stand it up or he's going to try to take it down. And just tell you about Vitor, I mean, per 15 minutes, right? He's taking down people 4.42 times. That's a lot. Takedown accuracy is 73%. Pretty good. So, and you also saw his sub game when he subbed Marcin in his last fight. So I think he definitely just has it all. A lot of raw potential to just do whatever in the cage. Modestas, I mean, low volume striker. He does look like he's improved in his second stint in the UFC. I think that if you do look at Modestas's record, right? I mean, he's came into the UFC fighting a lot of good 205ers at the time. I mean, came into the UFC, he did get the dub over Andreas Michailidis, a guy who I think Michelle, Alex Pereira also knocked out, so he got a good knockout right off the bat. But then he got, pretty much destroyed by Jimmy Crute. He lost a close fight against Mikhail Olajic, and then he just had a tough kind of injury kind of fight, but he still did lose against Khalil Roundtree, and then he took a couple years off, worked on his game, came back in his second stint in the UFC, and has gotten 2 decision dubs. So I think he looks better. He throws some pretty heavy leg kicks. He could trade shot for shots on his opponents. Mentally tough, and I think he's willing to throw down. He also has a large frame for 205 because he's going to be the larger. Technically, he's going to be the larger guy here against Vitor Petrino. However, I think that the UFC does like Vitor, especially in Brazil. I mean, I think they found him a good opponent in Modestas just because the only close fight that Vitor has had was against Anton, in my opinion, right? He still won that decision, but I think that the UFC found someone who really isn't going to try to grapple him too much. So he's going to be able to implement his either ground and pound or try to get a sub on his own. Might even KO Modestas. So the pick for me is Vitor. I think by KO, but I think decision could also be in play. Um, is he a parlayable piece? Looking at the odds, I mean, minus 193 right now, opened up at minus 221. I don't know if he's going to be parlayable just because I think Modestas could make this a close fight if it goes to decision, right? So I think if I were to play Vitor, I would look at something like inside the distance decision, no action when that prop comes out, or just play him as a prop because I don't know if that's a parlayable piece. I think Modestas can fight to a close decision. I mean, he's coming off two decision dubs, right? So pick here is Vitor Petrino, but I'm probably gonna stay away from him as a parlay piece and potentially play him as a prop, maybe even live bet. But I think that yeah, pick here is Vitor. What do you think about this fight, Gerard?
I like Vitor a lot here. And when I look at these two fighters, Modestas, I by each fight, I'm getting more and more less impressed by
Mm-hmm.
Bukauskas and more impressed by Petrino. And Petrino, I think he's like a physical specimen. This guy, he's a beast in grappling, and I think his stand-up has improved. I think he's more patient. He's not just throwing it, going in there and throwing like we saw against Anton. Um, and Bukauskas, it looks like Bukauskas looks more and more hittable against not that great opponents. So yeah, yeah, these are like some underwhelming wins for Bukauskas, and this is in Brazil. I don't know if he can get a decision there. I think there's a chance that Petrino can just throw him around,
Mm-hmm.
ragdoll him a bit in Brazil. And this might be like a coming out party for Vitor here against Modestas, who's been on a win streak, but not that all impressive personally. So I'm pretty medium to high confidence on Petrino here. And I'm probably going to play him in a parlay. But yeah, just not impressed by Bukauskas as of late. He's got the kickboxing, but Petrino's looking much more patient in terms of striking. And Bukauskas just looks more hittable and hit by the day. So yeah, I'm leaning Petrino here, medium to high confidence.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I don't blame you. I mean, I'm probably not as confident as you are, but maybe when the weigh-ins come and Vitor is going to look, absolutely jacked, maybe I'll change my mind just because yeah, I think, Petrino is an absolute powerhouse. We're going to see that when he hits the scales. Next fight that we have on the prelims, it's going to be another, I think, potential coming out party. It's going to be Elizeu Zaleski versus Rinat Fakhretdinov. Classic kind of striker versus grappler, if you will. Elizeu, I mean, he's 24-7. He is 3-2 in his last five. From Brazil, 36 years old. He's fighting against Rinat, 22-2, 5-0 in his last five. He's coming off of that Kevin Lee retirement fight where he just destroyed Kevin Lee. I think he knocked him down and then he just guillotine choked him. Um, 32 years old. As far as their measurables, they're pretty much similar. I think Fakhretdinov has a 1 inch height and reach advantage. I think that especially looking at the odds here, Renat opened up at minus 400, and he was kind of bet down to actually a minus like 250 or 235, and now he's settled into a minus 330. Interesting odds there. I'll let you break down this fight first, just so we can kind of switch it up. What are your thoughts on this fight? And I'll give my thoughts.
So Zaleski here, he's probably mostly going to be here to strike. I don't think he wants to grapple at all with a Renat Fakhretdinov. Um, he does have a win against our boy BSD, God of War, Benoit Saint Denis, but I think Benoit Saint Denis was just not in his weight division and
Yeah.
was just not there yet in terms of striking. So yeah, um, Zaleski, I think he's on the come down. He's looking not that great in his last fight. I think he could have lost that actually against Abu Bakar Nurmagomedov. That split decision win. I think he did get rocked there too. Um, and against Rinat, I think Rinat is on his way to be a top 5 contender.
Cool.
This guy, I think this guy is legit. He's 22-2, and his last 2 fights, he showed his he's much improved in the hands. He can strike against the long Brian Battle, who dropped him multiple times. Man, he's very impressive. That was very impressive, and I'm very high on Brian Battle. Zaleski, he's looking like he's on his way down here, and against an up and coming contender in Rinat, who I think all the hype is real, and then some. I believe he's probably going to be close to. I'm considering him being the lock of the card for me,
Mm.
Fakhretdinov. What worries me here is that this is in Brazil, and if Zaleski is able to avoid any catastrophic finishes or getting dropped or anything like that, Zaleski is a good striker. He's a pretty good striker, but I think he might be slowing down now. But yeah, Renat is my pick here. He's my potential lock on this card. So yeah, I like Renat here.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I agree with most of what you said. Zaleski, wild striker. He does have some legit power, fighting in constant movement, but I feel like he's on the wrong side of 35 for that kind of style, right? I believe his nickname is Capoeira, which is that kind of dancing Brazilian kind of style. Coming off of the split win over Abu Nurmagomedov, was taken down. You mentioned, I think he might have also got rocked. I don't think that's a good look to get that close of a fight over Abu, who is barely UFC caliber in my opinion. Before his Abu fight, like you mentioned, won against Benoit Saint Denis, but obviously Benoit was coming up from 155 to fight him at 170. Before that was a loss, split decision loss to Muslim Salikov, another old, past his prime kind of fighter. He has okay takedown defense, 65%, but he's lost by decision 56% of the time. He's been sub 28% of the time in his losses. I think that's a horrible recipe, especially fighting a guy like Rinat, who's a high pressure grappler, wrestler, comes at you right in your face and takes you down to pound on you or sub you. He has improved striking. I mean, coming off of a quick round one sub of Kevin Lee that sent him to retirement. He knocked down Kevin Lee. I think he subbed him. So he's improving with his hands, fighting at a pretty good gym at ATT. I also think that Renat's in the prime of his career, dark horse for the 170 division, like you mentioned, potential top 5 fighter there if he keeps on fighting and working his way up the ranks. Yeah, I mean Renat's a parlay piece for me. I think he's the absolute lock. I'll put him in all the parlays just because styles make fights, and I feel like so the only concern I might have for not is that he might be potentially too focused on the grappling, and maybe he could, find his neck in the guillotine or something like that. But I just feel that he's going to be too advanced and too strong to to have that happen against Elizeu. I mean, Zaleski does have a lot of veteran experience, but I feel like this is his time to kind of, he's kind of on his way out as well. I mean, just losing that last fight against Abubakar, not a good look. And plus, Zaleski only has 3 submission wins. 13% of his wins are submissions. That's not really that high, especially he has 24 wins, right? And only 3 of those submissions. So yeah, I mean the pick for me probably going to be Rinat here and probably a lock. So I'll put him in the parlays. Next fight that we have on the prelims going to be Daniel Marcos versus Victor Hugo. Very fun fight. I mean, I think that this is going to be, especially Daniel Marcos, right? 15-0. He's coming off of that very questionable split decision win over Davy Grant. I thought that he lost that fight personally. Uh, 30 years old, 5'7". I mean, Victor Hugo, 24-4. He's coming off of the Dana White Contender Series where he knee barred, got knee bar victory. So I mean, they're pretty much going to be the same age, same height. I think that Victor does have a slight reach advantage of 2.5. Man, Daniel Marcos. So coming off that sketch win, I mean, I think that fight was very alarming for me. He showed some low volume, freezing up a lot during the fight. This just seemed like a very different fighter as opposed to his previous UFC bouts. I mean, I watched him fight against Simon Oliveira, just finished that guy pretty good, right? And then in his previous Contender Series fights, doing pretty good work, even though that was also a decision win. I think Marco's is actually pretty solid everywhere. Good power, accuracy. He can rack up the combos when he's in rhythm. He also has an 89% takedown defense, which is actually pretty solid. 15-0, so obviously undefeated. This guy knows how to win. 8 decision victories, 7 KOs. Has the power and cardio to last all 3 rounds. I think that last fight, the reason why it was so close was because I think that it was a stylistic kind of matchup, right? Davy Grant, very much a veteran, knows what to do. Davy Grant's also can play the counter game with you, which is what Daniel Marcos likes to do as well. So I think Daniel Marcos just was matched up to someone who was pretty much kind of on the same level as him as far as skill, and they're both kind of the same style. That's why it was a kind of a weird fight, and it's a very close fight as well. And that's why I think he froze up, just because when he doesn't have someone coming at him, he also freezes up and waits for that opportunity, right? So I think the style made the fight there. The good thing for him about in this matchup is Victor, from what we saw from him in his previous few fights, he's a guy that always tries to come forward, right? Tries to get the sub or the finish at all costs. I mean, just looking at his record, 24-4, 38% of his wins are submissions, 33% of his wins are KOs. So he has 17 finishes out of those 24 wins. I mean, this guy also likes to take the fight to finish. I mean, he tries to get the fight to the ground and goes for the subs, but also, he can also knock people out. I think he has decent takedowns, can pump out those takedowns as well, but 89% takedown defense from Daniel Marcos. I mean, I think that's going to play a really huge part here. He is a fairly seasoned fighter, so he's not some guy that they just found that doesn't have any experience. Coming on short notice though, so I believe that he just fought like a couple weeks ago on Dana White Contender Series. So they just found him, and now he's fighting Daniel Marcos, 15-0. A part of me does think that this is a potential buy low on Daniel Marcos just because he looks so bad against Davy Grant. I mean, it was still a close fight though. I think Davy Grant is pretty decent as far as UFC caliber fighter. I think the pick for me is Daniel Marcos by KO just because of the style matchup. I think that Victor is going to try to come forward and try to get the fight to the ground, try to clinch him, maybe try to take him down. But I think he's gonna not have that much success in that. And I think as Victor is gonna try to do that, Daniel is gonna piece him up, potentially even like a knee him or something, like maybe like a flying knee KO. So pick here is Daniel Marcos by KO. However, just based on the odds, I mean, I don't know if I will put Daniel Marcos in a parlay. He opened up at -175. He's now -241, so people are buying in on the Daniel Marcos buy low. I'm probably not there yet, but maybe I might be convinced during the face-offs or weigh-ins. But yeah, pick for now is Daniel Marcos by KO, but I'll stay away for now. What are your thoughts on this fight, Gerard, for Marcos versus Hugo here?
Uh, yeah, Marcos, like you said, his last fight, I didn't like the volume output that he had. And if he comes out with the same type of volume and patiency, uh, Victor Hugo might get in there, find some damage and to work with, find a submission even. Um, I like Daniel Marcos. He's like you said, he is counter striking, and in this case, he has a full camp here over
Mm,
Victor Hugo. Victor Hugo is coming off of a quick turnaround, and had Hugo been in a longer camp, I might have played a little bit of Hugo actually because I think Hugo is actually the more well-rounded, maybe slightly more experienced fighter here. And Marcos, I think he does have the striking. He probably has Hugo beat on the terms of striking, but Hugo's well-roundedness in terms of mixing it up and having a threat, whether striking or submission, is something that Marcos has to be constantly aware of and might even slow him down and freeze him up at times. So we might see him freeze up at times against Hugo, whether in the stand-up or on the ground or in terms of grappling. Um, this one I'm probably not gonna play just yet, and I'm probably leaning Daniel Marcos as well, just because he's probably more prepared, and Victor Hugo's on this quick turnaround. But I'm also considering possibly playing a little bit on a Hugo submission
mm,
because I'm not sure if we've seen Marcos get threatened by someone who has the submission ability of a Hugo in
mhm.
his career yet. So yeah, this is probably a wait and see for me, but as of now, I'm leaning Daniel Marcos, but I'm gonna wait and see.
Yeah, same here, same here. Moving on to the next fight that we have, still in the prelims. I believe this is the future prelims, and I see why. I think this is going to be an extremely entertaining fight. This is going to be Elvis Brener versus Esteban Ribovics. Elvis Brener, 15-3, 4-1 his last five, coming off of the huge win, KO win over Gram Kutilase, where he was a huge underdog in that fight. 26 years old. He's going to fight Esteban Ribovics, 12-1, 4-1 his last five, coming off of that good dub over Kamela Kirk decision. He's 27 years old. Measurables are pretty much similar. I believe that Elvis has a 3-inch advantage there. Elvis, I mean, just looking at the odds now, he opened up at minus 205. Now he's a minus 160. That's pretty interesting there. Gerard, how about you go ahead and kick this one off, and I'll give my thoughts a little later. What are your thoughts on Elvis Brener and Esteban here?
This fight, I think this fight can be the fight of the night
Yeah,
potentially. Yeah, this is gonna be a banger. I like this matchup. This is a gift. I'm looking forward to this fight the most on this card. Um, Elvis Brener, he comes out. He's got some wild striking here, and he's okay defensively, but he does get hit. But he's there to get nasty in there, even with blood on his face and getting rocked multiple times. He's game to knock you out. uh, yeah, I like Elvis Brener, but Ribovics, I think this guy has nicer hands.
yeah.
This guy's hands are nice. He has good boxing, but he also leaves his chin out there too. So both these guys can get hit on the chin in this matchup here, and both can get rocked. This could turn out to be a war. And I think Elvis Brener, despite having the grappling advantage, I think he's down to stand and bang in Brazil, put on a show. Um, yeah, both these guys got pristine chins, man. They, if you've seen their fights, they got rocked multiple times. And in Ribovic's case, he almost came out with a win, I think. even though he got rocked multiple times. He is uh he who was that I think he fought a Russian guy. His
Yeah. Loic or whatever.
yeah, Loic.
Yeah.
Yeah, Loic. He it looked like he was about to finish that guy too,
Yeah.
but he ended up losing there and also getting rocked a lot in that fight too. But yeah, these guys have pristine chins. This could end up being a war. We know Brener, he's a proven dog and he can come out with a win. I'm most likely leaning Elvis Brener here just because he has that submission threat. And we've seen Ribovics get taken down and grappled on the ground, but he has pretty good stand up to get back on his feet. Um, but this fight, I'm leaning Elvis Brener, and yeah, I think this we're gonna see some fireworks in this fight, I believe. But yeah, I'm at a low confidence here, Elvis Brener as my pick here.
Are you gonna make a play on this fight, or just kind of sit back and enjoy it?
This fight, I might play Elvis Brener by submission,
Mm.
so I might put half a unit or less on that. I think if his coaches are smart, they would prefer him to train to get Ribovics on the ground and get find a submission there. But yeah, this can be a treat of a fight for sure.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of your points. I personally also think that this is going to be the fight of the night just because of how they match up stylistically. Elvis Brenner obviously is the zombie of shootbox, coming off of a huge underdog victory against Garam, where he weathered multiple storms and just outdogged Garam to around 3 KO. Extremely durable, tough. He's only lost by decision, so 3 losses, 3 decision losses. Good cardio and pace for 15 minutes. Always loves to come forward, implement cage control, eventually try to drag you down for a sub. That's kind of his plan A. But if that plan A isn't working, as you saw in his last fight, he's going to be there to stand and bang, hit and get hit. Good at mixing it up. He has takedowns and can stuff them as well. I mean, very well rounded guy, 10 subs out of his 15 wins. So he is really trying to get the sub at the end of the day. I also think that he has good power. So he has a pretty good game plan, throws power, throws bombs, and really relies on that chin and toughness to weather those storms. I think that that could be a potential issue just because Esteban, like you mentioned, talented fighter, good movement, pretty deceiving power. When you look at him, you don't think that he has that much power, but he lands pretty accurately. And I think that's part of why he has so much power, is because he lands like really sharp kind of boxing, like you mentioned. High guard, likes to pick his strikes, to pick his opponents apart. He also has good kicks. I mean, good accuracy, volume as well. The only red mark on kind of his fighting style is that he, I guess one of the two is that he can't get taken down. Got taken down pretty early against Kirk, and if Kirk had any sense of cardio, he might have not won. I mean, Esteban might have lost that fight, but obviously Kirk only has like 1 round in him to do that. He was also taken down at will against Loic. Um, just to give you context, he's been taken down 14 times in the last 2 fights. So not not that great of a takedown defense. Now, he because of that, even though he got taken down 14 times, it means he also got up, right? So although he doesn't have the greatest takedown defense, he has a pretty good get up game and fights hard to the end of the bell. I think that I think that there's a gap for both fighters here. On the feet, there's a gap. Esteban, I think, is the better striker of the two. I think on the ground, Elvis is going to be the better pressure kind of grappler and probably the better grappler overall. I think that this could look like Esteban's last fight, but Brener is going to have the cardio to do the game plan for all 3 rounds. I just don't know if Elvis Brener is going to have the control time to keep Esteban down for long. He's going to try to go for the subs, right? So, man, both guys are pretty durable. Not I don't think that they even have been finished yet in their careers. So right now, I'll probably lean Esteban by decision. I mean, I think it's pretty low confidence, just because I think that this is going to be a close fight. And if it's this close of a fight, I think I want to have a dog ticket with plus odds at the end of the day. Because I mean, I'll rather just go plus odds if it is kind of a close fight. I don't think that I think that's similar to a pick'em. So I'm actually I like the value here on Esteban. He's like what plus 141 right now, not too bad. So Esteban by decision for me is going to be something that is my pick, but low confidence. I'll probably pass for now. Let's see what happens in the weigh-ins. If you can find an over 1.5 line, I would do it. I think that's a great parlay piece, but bet online right now is over 2.5, so not too great. And obviously, both of these guys haven't been finished yet, but a finish could come during this fight just because how they both fight. Like you mentioned, I think Elvis could find a sub here. I think Esteban, especially if Elvis continues to move forward, he could get knocked out. We saw that in his last fight. I mean, this guy, during the fight, mid fight, he dyed his hair red because of all the blood that came out of his head. So um, you can't play that game for too long. That's why I'll probably go with Esteban, but we'll see. I think that this is going to be an entertaining fight. And I'm definitely going to tune in. Um, Next fight that we have is going to be on the main card. We finally got to the main card for the Sao Paulo fight card. This is going to be Ismael Bonfim versus Vinc from Hell. Ismael Bonfim, obviously 19-4, 4-1 his last five. He's coming off of that. Pretty, he lost pretty. It was a pretty entertaining loss, nonetheless. But he still lost against Benoit Saint Denis. 24, 7 years old, so kind of in his prime of his career. Maybe a few more years, then he'll be in his prime. Vince Pichel, obviously not in his prime. 40 years old, 14-3. He is surprisingly 3-2 in his last five. He's all coming off of that kind of decision loss against Marc Omanson, though, so not the greatest loss to have on your record. Their measurables. Vince is going to be the larger fighter here, 2 inch height advantage, 1 inch reach advantage. Odds for this fight, they have kind of ballooned. Ismael Bonfim is opened at minus 325. Now he's at minus 465. So people are just going in on the Ismael Bonfim train here. And I don't blame them. I mean, Ismael, as you saw with his last fight, wild striker, has legitimate power, looks for the KOs with his strikes. I think he does have accurate striking and can attack with multiple angles. He has pretty dangerous looping shots and can even throw in the knees and the flying knees like you saw when he knocked out Terrence McKinney. I think he has decent Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but he can get caught in a sub with his aggressive style, as you saw with the last fight, right? Can tire himself chasing finishes and get sloppy with his footwork. All four of his losses have been subs, like Benoit Saint Denis subbed him. I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue for this fight, though, because I think, from Help Shell, he is a solid striker, but not the most technical guy. I also think that he's a bit of a brawler himself. Good offensive wrestler, but bad defensive wrestler. He has 3 takedowns per 15 minutes, 54% takedown and accuracy, but he has a 23% takedown defense. So not the best defense for his takedowns. He has a good chin. He's only been knocked out once, and he's really only seemed to have lost to high-level wrestlers, grapplers. You're talking about Marco Manson, this Olympic Canadian wrestler, I believe, and then Gregor Gillespie, obviously, I think pretty good wrestling credentials as well. Um, yeah, I mean, just give me Ismail here. I think this is a buy low. I know that people think that Vince might have a chance just because, I mean, 14-3. That's not that bad of a record, right? But I mean, he's 40 years old. I, I don't know how much longer he can do this. And just looking at his last few fights, I mean, not the most impressive kind of, victories or even losses. Like his last fight was about a year and a half ago to Marco Manson. That's not that great of a look. And I think that Ismail, the only concern I have for Ismail is that if he makes this into a brawl kind of matchup where they're trading shots, then it turns closer into a 50-50 kind of matchup, right? But I think that, especially coming off of that L against Benoit Saint Denis, where he was kind of doing the same thing, right? He was letting Benoit like just pretty much like kick him in the body. And I don't think I think he's going to be a little smarter this time, especially in Brazil. I think he's going to want to secure this dub. I think he knows that the UFC probably put this guy in front of him just so he can kind of get a dub, right, and get his career back on track. Um, yeah, just give me Ismael Bonfim here. I think that Ismael by decision, just because Vince is pretty durable, but I could also see Ismael by sub. I think that he could probably sub this guy too. So pick now is Ismael by decision. I think he's a potential parlay piece. I'm not quite ready to say he's a lock yet, just because he's a really wild striker and is a little too aggressive for me. Like I think that if he was more patient like his brother, then this will be a lock. But I think that yeah, for now, Ismail is a potential parlay piece for me. Gerard, what are your thoughts on this Bonfim versus Pinchel here?
Bonfim, he should win this. I mean, he's going up against a over 40-year-old Pichel from hell who damn near looks 60 to me. Uh, but Pichel, it's kind of looks can be kind of deceiving because Pichel's giving me he's really tough. He's a tough guy. He's giving me these vibes of Darren the Damage Elkins type of type of toughness. And Pichel, he doesn't have the damage, but he's from hell. So he might give Bonfim some hell if Bonfim is rushing too much. I think it might be a bad sign if we see Bonfim rushing again, like rushing the fight and getting a little sloppy. He finds himself in. But against this guy, this should be a kind of a layup for Bonfim because even if it goes to a decision, I don't think the judges they don't see Pichel striking that clean. So even if he connects, they don't really value the way Pichel strikes. So Bonfim could is likely to win if it goes to a decision or if Bonfim can find a finish. But Pichel's a tough guy here. So obviously the pick is a medium confidence on Bonfim, with a caveat that this could be a pick 'em if he rushes,
Yeah,
but he should be smarter than to do that again. So one thing that I might play here is I think Pichel's a tough guy. I think he'll like the damage Elkins, he'll probably be able to last. So here I'm actually looking at the over 2.5
ooh,
Pichel versus Bonfim. I don't know if Bonfim can finish him because Pichel's a tough guy. He may be slower now at 41, but I think this could go over 2.5. It might even go to a decision, but I'm leaning Bonfim, but I might play a little bit on the over 2.5 here.
would you put Ismail as a parlay piece just straight up as money line?
Straight up as money line. I think I would, yeah. He he would be a parlay piece, but it's kind of hard to say because Pichel might there might be some upset potential here for Pichel, and I get more and more suspicious if I see Bonfim's odds keep going higher and higher. So as long as Bonfim's odds don't go crazy high, I'm pretty okay with parlaying Bonfim here.
For
Yeah.
sure. Awesome. Well, next up we have another fight on the main card. This is going to be Rodolfo Vieira versus Armin Petrosian. Rodolfo Vieira, the black belt hunter, 9-2. He is 3-2 in his last five, coming off of that arm triangle choke against Cody Brundage, 34 years old, fighting against Armin Petrosian, 8-2, coming off of that good, decent victory over Christian Leroy Duncan, the guy who turned his back to his opponent. Very fun fight to watch, especially if you had a ticket on Leroy Duncan like I did. Um, 33 years old. I think Armin's going to be the slightly taller fighter, and Rodolfo is going to be the longer fighter for reach. Both about the same age. Odds wise for this fight, we have near a pick'em. So Rodolfo Vieira opened up at minus 125. He did get bet to a dog at around plus 130 for the last couple weeks, but he's since has settled back into being a pick'em at minus 114. So yeah, I mean it's going to be a close fight. That's what the odds makers are kind of trying to tell you. I kind of see the same thing. Rodolfo does have world class Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, pretty explosive takedowns. Although I think he relies more on his speed and power to get those takedowns, not the greatest technique to get those takedowns. I think that Rodolfo can weather storms. I mean, you just pretty much saw his last fight, right, against Cody Brundage. Although Cody Brundage is kind of a, you know, not the greatest reputation in the UFC kind of circle right now. Cody almost knocked out Rodolfo, right? If you do look at that last fight, almost KO'd him, but Rodolfo weathered those storms and came back to get the sub against Cody Brundage. I think Rodolfo Vieira's his striking is decent. I think it is improving, but overall, this guy wants to get to the fight to the ground and go for the subs with his decorated Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I mean, this guy has pretty clean Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. His conditioning seems to have improved, especially since he lost to Fluffy Hernandez. That fight, I think, showed him that hey, like to win in the UFC, you have to have a good gas tank, and I think that now he can kind of last all 15 minutes, right? I mean, y'all saw that in the last fight against Chris Curtis. Although he lost that fight, he lasted for all 15 minutes. He didn't get finished or anything. So I think his gas tank is improving. This is going to be a stylistic kind of matchup. It's going to be striker versus grappler because Armin's a decorated kickboxer. He's found some success in the UFC so far. For as decorated a kickboxer as he is coming into the UFC, I mean, I think that he can also be a brawler. You know, pretty decent technique, good chin. I think he has decent get up game because he has been taken down, but he seems to get back up. Um, Once again, this is going to be a classic striker versus grappler. I feel like whoever wins is probably going to win pretty convincingly, right? I think that Rodolfo could sub Armin if he gets the fight to the ground, but I could also see Armin piecing Rodolfo up for like 15 minutes, maybe even getting a knockout. So I personally don't see too much value in this fight. I would lean towards Rodolfo by sub, but I'm probably going to pass just because I think that the gap is just so wide between these two fighters in their respective styles that you're pretty much it is a pick 'em fight. I do agree with the odds makers. I think this is going to be pick 'em fight. So unless as a better you feel like you have a good sense of where this fight's going to go, I would personally probably lean towards passing for this fight. But pick here is Rodolfo by sub. Gerard, what are your thoughts on Riviera versus Petrosian here?
I see Petrosian. He's all right. Let me start with Rodolfo Vieira.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely has the grappling advantage, and same with Petrosian, the striking advantage here. I think Vieira is gonna have more powerful takedowns than Petrosian will be used to. So there's one way to lean there. And on Petrosian's side, yeah, I can see that too. He can very well just piece up Vieira for 15 rounds. Um, the reason why I'm leading Rodolfo here is because I don't think Petrosian is that dangerous of a striker. Like he's just kind of like a kickboxing for points type of fighter, the way I see him. And I think Vieira doesn't have to worry too much of the power against Petrosian, so he might be just not afraid to just shoot and just tackle him down basically round to round if Petrosian lasts on the ground that long. So I'm at a low confidence here because I could see both sides, like you said, but I would lean Rodolfo here because yeah, I think he could just take him down, in my opinion. So yeah, Rodolfo's the pick here, low confidence, but yeah, just on the simple fact that I don't see Petrosian as that much of a that much power in his hands. So yeah, that's my pick here.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's gonna be a fun fight either way. So next up we have Kyle Barajo versus Abus Magomedov. This is going to be in the 185-pound division. This is going to be the, I believe, fourth fight in the main card, third, fourth. Um, go Kyle Barajo, obviously the natural 14-1, 5-0 in his last five, coming off of that rear naked choke against Mikhail Olajic, 30 years old. He's fighting against Abu Magomedov, 25, 5 and 1, coming off of that Sean Strickland destruction where he got KO'd. 33 years old, so he's going to be a slightly older fighter here. I think he's also going to be a larger fighter here as well, 6'2", 78-inch reach compared to 75-inch reach for Kyle, 6'1" for Kyle as well. Odds for this fight, very interesting. Minus 250 right now for Kyle Bravo. He opened up at a minus 425, so opened up at a pretty much 4-1 favorite. Now he's been bet down to minus 250. I think that this is going to be another kind of striker versus grappler kind of matchup. I mean, Kyle's a smart, measured grappler. Um, I think he's a step above a BJJ nerd just because he actually has good takedowns and can control his opponent on the ground in addition to going for subs. I actually think he has pretty amazing fight IQ. He will go for the boring decision win with control time if that is his best option. And you can kind of see that with his 14-1 record. He does have a good submission game when it's open to him. You can see that in his fight against Mikhail Olajic, where there's such a gap in terms of the submission game, the striking game. Sorry, not the striking game, but the submission game. Um, and he subbed Mikhail, but he also had a decision victory over Armin Petrosian, Mahmoud Maradov, right? So he can't control people, and he's not gonna throw the control time away for the sub. So he's pretty smart in that. Now, granted, I think that Kyle has had close fights where he does seem to be holding on for the win. He's only had one finish in the UFC so far, his last fight. He has good movement, footwork to level change into his takedown attempts. I think he has pretty good cardio and pace the last 15 minutes. Not the greatest striker, but he is constantly improving, which is something I like as well. I think that Abu, I mean, powerful striker, great length, frame for the 185 division. A lot of quick finishes on his resume, but I feel like he comes up short in a lot of these big moments, right? You can kind of see the one of the first introductions I had to Abu was when I watched tape of him against Lewis Taylor, who's Bilal Muhammad's coach now. Lewis Taylor was old back then. He got KO'd in that PFL tourney, right? So Abu came up short there. Then they gave him this Sean Strickland matchup, and that was something that crazy, insane step up of competition going from Dustin Stolfisk to Sean Strickland. And they gave him a chance to really break into the middleweight division. Because, I mean, Abu does have really nice stand up. I mean, his kicks are fantastic. I think his boxing is pretty good as well. But you kind of saw in that last fight, he does seem a little hittable, and he has horrible cardio. He had a great round one against Sean Strickland. And then after that round, he just seemed to gave up. He just gave up after Sean Strickland gained a bit of momentum, and you saw what Sean Strickland did, right? He showed that there are levels to this in terms of the cardio and pace, and he also showed that hey, your boxing might not be as good. So I personally can't trust Abu with his horrible cardio. Um, he has not been tested in the grappling department yet in the UFC. I think he will be tested here. The pick here is Kyle. I think he's a potential parlay piece. I will hold off for now. I'll probably see on the weigh-ins, see how both these guys look, because Kyle has had some close fights in the UFC so far, and Abu probably coming off the lowest point in his career. So maybe this is a potential buy low on Abu. I could see Abu potentially KOing Kyle, but yeah, Kyle's the pick here for me. What are your thoughts on this fight, Gerard?
Kaio definitely is going to be looking for that wrestling, the grappling and taking Abu down. But Magomedov might be live for the first round, and he's probably always live for the first round. So it might be harder for Kyle to take him down in the first round, just because Abus has his energy during that round. Then believe it or not, Abus Magomedov, he he has championship experience.
That's true. He does.
He went up against Sean Strickland, who I believe in that first round looked better than Israel Adesanya against the champ. So if you're to do MMA math, some people might say Bryo might get knocked out.
Yeah.
But my pick here, I'm leaning Kyle Bryo just because I think he's just more well rounded. He has the gas tank, and you tend to think always bet cardio in a matchup like this. But maybe Abus actually leveled up from having that experience and that getting him humbled and getting checked by now the champ. So we might see a better Magomedov, but it could also be that it's just part of his DNA to to go down under pressure. And this is in Brazil too, so the crowd's going for Bryo, obviously. And yeah, I'm leaning Kyle Bryo, low to medium confidence, but if I see a round one knockout prop for Abus, I might use that to hedge, depending on how juicy that play would be. But the pick here is low to medium confidence Kyle.
Yep. Yeah. I definitely agree. I think this is going to be a interesting career turning point for either of these fighters. So interesting to see. Interested to see how this fight's going to go. Up next, we have Rodrigo Nascimento versus Dontel Mays. Heavyweight matchup on the main card. We're on the third fight on the main card right now. I think that, I mean, I'm pretty sure these guys fought already, right? Like 3 years ago, and I think Rodrigo subbed him. Uh, Rodrigo's 10-1. You know, he's coming off of a split decision win over Eliard Latifi, 30 years old. He's fighting against Dontel Mays, 10-5. He's coming off of that kind of KO against Andre Orlovsky, where I mean, pretty old guy. Dontel is going to be the taller fighter here. Um, Odds for this fight, Rodrigo is he opened up at a minus 400, and now he's a minus 171. Once again, these guys, I I think they both fought already in 2020 or something like that, and Rodrigo ended up just subbing Dontel Mays in round two. Rodrigo is a grappler, likes to march forward, likes to fight in the clinch. Very similar to I think Dontel Mays fought Augusto Sakai, right? So like, it's like similar stand up to Augusto Sakai, but he has the added benefit of having some pretty good grappling technique in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I think he's pretty quick on the feet as well compared to other heavyweights. Good subs for a heavyweight can be dangerous with his Jiu Jitsu. Dontel Mays, decent boxer. He has good hands, decent kicks as well. I still think that Dontel Mays is a little bit unpolished. Like I feel like he has a little bit more of a learning curve to do in the UFC. He does have heavyweight power. You saw that in his last fight. He was, kind of losing that fight, and then he found that knockout kind of power and changed the fight instantly. He's improving his grappling ground game, but I think that he's going to be overmatched on the ground here again. This is a rematch of the fight 3 years ago, and Rodrigo already subbed him 3 years ago. So I just don't see how this fight's going to go any different, to be honest. I feel like Rodrigo's going to take Dontel Mays down and probably sub him again. Um, Mays has improved, but the pick here is Rodrigo by sub. I'm I'm probably going to stay away from this just because heavyweights could be a ugly, sloppy fight. As far as the potential parlay piece, though, I think that the over rounds, 1.5 rounds, minus 200 over 1.5 right now. I think that could be a possible parlay piece for me. I know that it's heavyweights and, things could get pretty nasty pretty quick, but I feel like both of these guys are, especially Dontel Mays. He got subbed in his first fight with Rodrigo. I think he's going to try to play this a little safer against this guy. Rodrigo, I feel like he's going to see Dontel has improved a lot in the last 3 years or so. So it might take him a little longer to get that sub in. So play here is over 1.5. That's a potential parlay piece for me, minus 200. I think that's pretty good value. But I think Rodrigo's going to probably sub him. Hopefully over 2.5 or 1.5. So that's my pick. Gerard, what do you think about this Mace versus Nascimento fight?
Personally, for me, when I looked at this, I think there's not much to analyze here. Um, it's a rematch, and yeah, this is, I'd say, low tier heavyweight fight. And sticking to my rules, I'm probably not gonna play this if it's low tier heavyweights. You just, it's kind of, it can get kind of weird pretty quick. It could swing either way. But obviously, the pick here is Rodrigo. Um, Low confidence here, but just because it's a heavyweight bout, I'm just kind of on these low tier heavyweight fights. I'm not really looking to play these too much, but yeah, I could see it going the way it did last time again. I don't know if Dontel Mays has improved enough to make it any different. So yeah, pick here's Rodrigo, same as last time.
Same as last. Yeah, exactly. All right, up next we have the co-main event of the fight card. We have Gabriel Bonfim, brother of Ismael, obviously, versus Nicholas Dalby. Gabriel Bonfim, 15-0, 5-0 his last five, coming off that submission win over Trevor Giles, pretty impressive. He's fighting against Nicholas Dalby, 22-4-1, coming off of that unanimous decision victory over Muslim Salikov as a dog. I remember that because I had that ticket. 38 years old. Gabriel's going to be the larger fighter here, obviously. I think that the odds for this fight they've gotten pretty ballooned. I mean, minus 550 opened up. Gabriel got bet down to minus 300 instantly, and then now he's a minus 600 because people are just kind of shoving it. I think Gabriel has the whole package. A great strength of schedule. Um, you know, Trevin Giles, I actually think is pretty legit as a UFC fighter. He just finished him like it was nothing in round one. Um, he's had 3 round 1 submissions in his 3 UFC fights so far. Trey Waters, the guy that he finished in round 1 of the Dana White Contender Series. You just saw Trey Waters what he did to Josh Quinlan, so I think that's a good opponent to have on your record. I think that Gabriel Bonfim's subs are deadly. He really goes for those finishes. He's going to have a major advantage on the ground here. I think that he's also going to hold his own on the feet against Dalby. He's a sharp striker. He's much more patient than his brother Ismael, which is something that I really like. Once again, all finishes 15-0. He's probably going to try to finish Dalby here, but he's going to be patient doing so. Dalby is a karate style fighter, very light on his feet. I think he's okay grappling. You know, he can mix up the grappling, but he's more of a striker than grappler, obviously. Relies on the volume to grind out decision win. He has good cardio, good pace. He is getting older though. If you just see his last like looking at Lucas Dalby's opponents, I mean, my God, like he's fought Muslim Salikov, Warley Alves, Claudio Silva, Tim Means, D Rod. D Rod just got cut. Tim Means like 40 something. Claudio Silva, pretty sure is 40 something. Warley Alves just got KO'd by Ikram. Muslim Salikov's pretty old. I mean, like he's fought all old guys, right? And before that, he also fought Alex Oliveira, the Cowboy, who's not in the UFC anymore. I mean, like I'm pretty sure the UFC just found someone who's coming off a win, so they can be like, hey, Gabriel Bonfim, keeps on finishing these guys who's doing pretty good in the UFC. So the only way I could see this not working out for Gabriel is if the fight gets later on in the later rounds, right? Round like two, three, and if Gabriel doesn't finish him, they could get interesting because we really haven't seen Gabriel be tested in the later rounds yet. He's been finishing people in the round one a lot. I think that yeah, we'll see what his cardio looks like. I suspect that he'll look just fine just because of how he fights. Very patient fighter. I think he has pretty good IQ. Pick here is Gabriel by sub. I think he's a parlay piece. I'll put him in the parlays. Gerard, what's your thoughts on this fight?
Gabriel Bonfim, he's a budding star in the UFC, and he's up against Nicholas Dalby, who's a vet who's been on a win streak against guys who are nowhere as dangerous as Gabriel Bonfim. So obviously, Bonfim here is the lock, but um, I think I'll probably take a stab at the over 1.5
Mm,
on this
yep.
fight because Dalby's only this guy's name is basically Decision Dalby. So yeah, he's always in decisions. He's pretty durable. And I think Dalby has pretty good IQ. I think he knows that this guy finishes people early, so he's well aware of that. And I think Bonfim, like you said, I think he won't rush things. I think he'll let the fight come to him. And it just so happened that all these fights have been finished pretty quickly. um, and mostly against opponents who aren't vets.
Yeah.
So he's up against a guy who's always going to decision and is a vet and is smart and is on a win streak. So I can see this going over 1.5, even in Brazil. So the lock here is Gabriel Bonfim, but I'll probably take a stab at the over here.
I really like that play actually. Kind of sad I didn't think of it myself. Over 1.5. That's pretty good. Plus 115 right now on Bet Online. Yeah, I love that play. Moving on to the next fight on the main card, we have the main event. It's the Derek Lewis versus Jailton Almeida. It's going to be the fight that's built around the card. Jailton Almeida, 19-2, 5-0 in his last five, coming off of that rear naked choke over Rosenstruck. Derek Lewis, 27-11, 4-1 at the 2-3 in his last five. He's coming off that flying knee kind of KO against De Lima there. 38 years old. He's going to be the older fighter here. They actually have the same measurables, so same height, same reach. Um, yeah, I mean, this is all going to depend on how Derek Lewis kind of looks, right? Like if he comes out like in his last fight and looks anything like the last fight, I think that we could be having a closer fight on our hands than we think we do. I mean, Jalton right now it's a minus 450 favorite. Opened up at minus 700. I think minus 700 might be a little disrespectful. I think the odds right now are actually fair. So I understand why people took the dog odds and Derek Lewis there. Overall, I mean, I do think that Jailton Almeida, jail time Almeida, he is a little bit different as far as his technique on the ground and his takedowns. Even if you look at all of his fights so far, this guy's just been taking people down at will, blasting double legs, and then finishing them on the ground with either KOs or subs. All of them pretty much in round one, except for when he finished Shamil in round two. But that was also another dominating fight. I will say that Shamil, that one strike that he landed compared to the 45 strikes that Jailton landed, he did hit Jailton a bit. So I do wonder what would happen if Derek Lewis hits Jailton because I don't know if he's been tested in that realm yet, right? He's just really been taking down his opponents and kind of grinding them out and subbing them within that round. Uh, I do think that this is going to be a sell high on Derek Lewis, unfortunately, coming off of that pretty highlight KO against DeLima. People tend to forget that before that he was taken down at will and subbed against Sergey Spivak. And then he got knocked out by Sergey Pavlovich and Tai Tuivasa in his last other two losses. So I do think that Derek is probably on his way out. He's made some pretty good strides as far as his fitness, right? Came in with a pretty good fitness for his last fight, so that kind of changed things. But De Lima is not the greatest heavyweight, is nowhere near who Jailton Almeida is on, the ground. And also Jailton Almeida, I just feel like this guy has championship potential. I feel like he's gonna potentially fight for the belt in the next year or so. So I do think that jail time is a lock. I mean, he's probably going to take down Derek Lewis and sub him within round one. So pick here is Jailton by sub, but Derek Lewis always live for the knockout, right? So maybe if you get down to it and if you put Jailton Almeida in your parlays, maybe do a little bit of a hedge because you never know what could happen with Derek Lewis. He could come with one punch and just end things there. So Jailton's a parlay piece, but hedge, maybe Derek Lewis by KO, or when if your parlays get to that and Jailton's your last fighter, just hedge and midpoint it and move on to the next fight card. Gerard, what are your thoughts here on the main event?
Jailton is the obvious probable pick here, but I'm probably not gonna put him in any parlays because I'm still kind of scared of the Black Beast,
Like these,
Derek Lewis.
stick that tongue out.
uh, yeah, I'm kind of gives you a little bit of a nightmare
Yeah,
kind of thing because I haven't in the back of my head I have like this mirage of Jailton shooting in the first round, and then he gets meet up with the Black Beast uppercut.
yeah. Ooh,
In the back of my head, it's kind of like what I can potentially see, but I'm leaning Jailton by submission here. But depending on the odds, I might hedge a round one Derek Lewis by KO, just because I'm not crazy about the way Jailton approaches the takedown. His
hmm
entry when he shoots, it's like there's like not really a setup. He's just
yeah. He just
shooting, and
blasts his
that's like an easy read for Derek Lewis. I was like, oh, this guy is shooting uppercut.
right, right, or a knee like he did
Oh,
last fight.
yeah, or a knee, or a flying knee too. I was like, oh, he's shooting, throw a knee.
Yeah,
So yeah, Jailton is like a medium confidence by submission here, but depending on the odds, I might play round one Derek Lewis by knockout as a hedge. But yeah, I'm not putting Almeida as a parlay piece.
that's a fair assessment. Fair assessment. And
Yeah,
hopefully the props will get released as the week goes on. Once again, we're doing this on a Monday right now, so I think that the props will probably get released on Thursday, maybe Wednesday. So yeah, we'll wait for those to see what that looks like. Um, do you think the fight's gonna go under 1.5? Because it's minus 350 right now for that.
under 1.5.
Yeah.
Actually, I might even take a stab at the over
Oh, over. Yeah, plus
here. Yeah,
295 right now.
yeah, because if Almeida's not reckless, he might be patient about it.
Hmm.
So against Derek Lewis, because I don't think he's faced a guy who can touch him like a Derek Lewis. And in his past fights, we've seen him get touched clean on
Right.
the chin. So if that was Derek Lewis's hand, it might be a different story. So yeah, but I'm probably gonna wait and see. But as of now, I'm thinking Almeida submission, maybe a Lewis round one KO hedge.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that pretty much wraps it up for the breakdown for UFC Sao Paulo. This is going to be a very fun event, so definitely everyone tune in for this one. I believe that it's going to start at, I think, like 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time or 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So probably the later kind of fight night that we have here, but yeah, going to be fun nonetheless. Before we wrap up, I wanted to say, everyone, please like, comment, and subscribe for the channel. We really need those like, comments, and subscriptions. Really help us out as far as growing the channel. Our website is coming up pretty soon, so be on the lookout for that. We will release the link when it is 100% finished. I've looked at some previews of it. Looks fantastic. And that's going to be where we can see, a lot more features that we're going to have for our YouTube channel, and as far as our kind of UFC business in a way. So be on the lookout for that. Gerard, before we wrap up, do you have any kind of last thoughts about this fight card, or anything at all that we're trying to do?
Um, Make sure you guys like and subscribe and be on the lookout for our website. And yeah, this should be a fun one. Stay tuned.
Awesome. Cool, cool. Well, that about does it for Pure Picks. Once again, I'm James, your host, and Gerard, my colleague, and yeah, we'll be here probably next time for the next event. I believe is what, UFC 295, right? It's
Yeah.
Yuri. Oh, that's gonna be a fun one. So yeah, definitely
Yeah.
strap in for that one. Until next time, we're out.